Officer Vance Harlan's venomous words cut across Riverside Park as he sneered at Maya Bennett, who sat peacefully on a bench watching her 8-year-old daughter Lila play. Keep your ghetto spawn away from civilized children before they spread their diseases. The playground fell silent. Other parents froze, shocked by the officer's blatant cruelty. Maya slowly stood, her voice steady but firm. "I'm sorry. What did you just say about my child?" "You heard me, welfare queen." Harlan stepped closer, his face twisted with disgust. "Now pack up your little criminal." And the slap came without warning. Maya's head snapped to the side, the sound echoing like a gunshot across the park. Children screamed. Parents pulled out phones, frantically recording. Lila dropped from the swing, sobbing as she ran toward her mother. But Maya didn't cry. She slowly turned back, touching her burning cheek with unnaturally calm fingers, studying Harlan's badge number like she was memorizing evidence. Have you ever watched someone make a mistake that would destroy their entire career? Earlier that day, Maya Bennett had been just another single mother navigating her Saturday routine. She dropped Lila off at soccer practice, grabbed coffee from the corner bodega where Mrs. Ellis always asked about her government work, and settled onto her usual bench at Riverside Park with a clear view of the playground. To any observer, she looked like countless other parents, tired but attentive, scrolling through her phone while keeping one eye on the children. But there were subtle differences that only a trained eye might notice. The way she positioned herself with her back to a tree, clear sight lines in all directions. How she checked her phone not for social media or texts, but for what appeared to be work notifications marked priority and field update. "Agent Bennett, are you still coming to Jamal's graduation party?" Her former colleague Simone had called just as Lila's soccer practice ended. "Just Maya now," she corrected quickly, glancing around to make sure no one had overheard. And yes, she would be there if this assignment wrapped up. "Assignment? Girl, I thought you were taking time off for—" "I'll call you later, Simone." Maya ended the call abruptly as Lila bounded over, grass stains on her jersey and excitement radiating from her 8-year-old frame. Now sitting on that same bench where everything would soon change, Maya watched her daughter claim the highest swing. This park had become their sanctuary. Not just because Lila loved the new playground equipment, but because Maya's current work required her to observe this specific location during peak family hours. She had been documenting patterns, the way Officer Vance Harlan and his partner conducted their patrols, how they interacted with different families, the complaints that had been filed and mysteriously dismissed about aggressive enforcement targeting Black and Latino families specifically. Mrs. Morales, an elderly woman who brought her grandson here daily, had approached Maya earlier. "They told Miguel he couldn't play on the big kid equipment," she whispered, glancing around nervously. "Said it was for appropriate families only." When I asked what that meant, the tall officer, the mean one, he just stared at me until we left. Maya had listened, made mental notes, and added another entry to her growing file. Her documentation, witness statements, video evidence, a pattern of behavior that violated federal civil rights laws. Her phone buzzed with another work message. Status update needed. Timeline for field observations. She typed back carefully. Ongoing surveillance. Multiple incidents documented. Recommend continuing current position. The response came quickly. Understood. Maintain cover. Report any escalation immediately. Escalation. The word made her stomach tighten. She had seen enough cases to know that officers like Harlan rarely stayed at the level of verbal intimidation. Sooner or later, someone would push back, and when they did, "Mama, watch this," Lila called out, pumping her legs to swing higher. "I'm watching, baby. You're flying." But Maya was watching more than her daughter. She was cataloging the way other families unconsciously shifted when the patrol car made its rounds. How the Vega family had stopped coming after what Mrs. Morales described as a very unpleasant encounter. How the teenage boys shooting hoops had learned to scatter the moment they spotted Harlan's uniform. This community was being systematically intimidated, and the formal complaints were disappearing into bureaucratic black holes, which was exactly why federal oversight existed. Why agents like her spent time blending into communities, documenting what local authorities preferred to ignore. Her phone rang. Lila's school principal. "Miss Bennett, I hate to bother you on the weekend, but we've had some concerns about Lila's recent behavior. She's been asking a lot of questions about police officers, whether they're good guys or bad guys. Some of her drawings have been concerning." Maya closed her eyes. Even at 8, Lila was absorbing the tension that surrounded them. The knowledge that their safe spaces weren't actually safe. "I'll talk to her, Ms. Whitaker. Thank you for calling. Is everything okay at home? If there's something we should know..." "Everything's fine. Just some grown-up worries she's picking up on." But nothing was fine. Not when families had to calculate which playgrounds were safe. Not when children learned to read officer moods before they could read chapter books. Not when a federal agent had to work undercover to document what should have been obvious to any supervisor with eyes. The patrol car rounded the corner right on schedule. Maya straightened, her pulse quickening with the familiar surge of adrenaline that came before any operation. She didn't know that soon everything would change, that her carefully maintained cover would be blown in the most violent way possible. She only knew that justice sometimes required witnesses, and today she was perfectly positioned to witness everything. The patrol car pulled up with deliberate slowness, tires crunching on the gravel path that wound through Riverside Park. Officer Vance Harlan emerged first, his massive frame casting a long shadow across the playground. His partner, Officer Lena Vargas, followed more hesitantly, her expression already showing the discomfort that would haunt her testimony later. Maya watched them approach, her trained eye immediately cataloging details. Harlan's aggressive posture, the way he scanned the diverse families like a predator selecting prey. Vargas's reluctance, staying a half step behind, her hand unconsciously resting on her radio rather than her weapon. "Mama!" Lila called from the swings. "Why did those police officers look at you like that?" "Like what, baby?" "Like you did something bad." From the mouth of an 8-year-old came the truth that adults spent careers trying to document. Even children could recognize the weight of unjust scrutiny. Harlan stopped directly in front of Maya's bench, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. The positioning was intentional, a power play designed to intimidate. What he didn't know was that federal agents were trained to recognize and counter exactly these psychological tactics. "Afternoon, ma'am." His voice carried the false politeness that preceded cruelty. "We've had some complaints about loitering in this area." Maya's response was measured and professional. "What specific complaints, officer?" She glanced at his name tag, already knowing what she would find. Officer Harlan. The fact that she read his name seemed to irritate him. Most people avoided eye contact, avoided personalizing these encounters. Her directness threw him off his practiced script. Complaints about people who don't belong here make other families uncomfortable. "I see. And what makes you think I don't belong here?" It was a simple question, but it cut straight to the heart of his assumptions. Around the playground, other parents were starting to take notice, Mrs. Ellis from the bodega pulled out her phone, already sensing something wrong. A jogger slowed her pace, circling back to stay within earshot. Vargas shifted uncomfortably. "Vance, maybe we should—" "I got this, Lena." Harlan's voice sharpened. He leaned closer to Maya, invading her personal space. "Look, lady, I don't know what game you're playing, but you need to pack up your kid and move along before this becomes a problem." What kind of problem? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Maya remained perfectly still on the bench, her posture relaxed but alert. She wasn't backing down, not showing the fear he was accustomed to seeing. The kind where Child Protective Services gets involved. Harlan snarled, his mask of professionalism finally slipping. The kind where we start asking questions about supervision and appropriate environments for children. The threat hit like a physical blow. Around the playground, parents exchanged horrified glances. Someone threatened to take your child away, and every parent in earshot felt their own vulnerability. But Maya's training kicked in. Document everything. Stay calm. Let him reveal his true nature. "Are you threatening to make a false report to CPS because I asked you to explain your complaint?" "False." Harlan's voice rose. "Lady, look around you. Look at how you're dressed, where you're sitting, the kind of influence you're exposing that kid to. Real parents don't need the police to explain. Keep your ghetto spawn away from civilized children before they spread their diseases." The words exploded across the playground like shrapnel. Every conversation stopped. Children paused mid-play, sensing the adult tension without understanding its source. Lila's swing slowed as she turned toward her mother, confusion written across her young face. Maya stood slowly, every movement controlled. "I'm sorry. What did you just say about my child?" "You heard me, welfare queen." Harlan stepped closer, his face twisted with a hatred that had been festering for years. "Now pack up your little criminal and get out before Before you what, officer?" Her voice cut through his rage like ice water. Something in her tone, the complete absence of fear, the clinical precision of someone documenting evidence, should have warned him, should have made him step back, reassess, remember his training. Instead, he leaned forward until his face was inches from hers. "Before you learn what happens to people who don't know their place." Vargas took a step forward. "Vance, that's enough. We should stay out of this, Lena. This one needs to understand." The slap came without warning. Harlan's hand connected with Maya's cheek with a crack that echoed across the entire park. The force of it snapped her head to the side, leaving an immediate red handprint across her dark skin. Around the playground, chaos erupted. Children screamed, parents shouted. Mrs. Ellis's phone captured everything from 15 feet away. The jogger was already dialing 911, though she wasn't sure who to call when the police were the ones committing the crime. "Mama." Lila's terrified voice cut through the noise as she abandoned the swing, running toward her mother with tears streaming down her face. But it was Maya's reaction that would haunt everyone who witnessed it. She didn't cry. She didn't shout. She didn't even rub her burning cheek. Instead, she slowly turned back to face Harlan, her movements deliberate and calm. "Officer Vance Harlan, badge number 4127, she said quietly, her voice carrying across the now silent playground. "Chicago Police Department, District 18. There was something chilling about the way she cataloged the information, like she was collecting evidence, like she knew exactly what she was doing. Harlan, high on adrenaline and righteous rage, didn't recognize the danger. "That's right, sweetheart. Remember that name when you're filling out your welfare applications. Vargas grabbed his arm. Vance, we need to go now. Not until she understands. I understand perfectly. Maya interrupted, pulling Lila close while maintaining eye contact with Harlan. I understand that you just committed assault and battery against a civilian in front of multiple witnesses while in uniform representing the Chicago Police Department. Her legal precision should have been a red flag. The way she framed the incident in exact statutory language, the calm recitation of facts while her daughter sobbed against her side. But Harlan was too far gone, too intoxicated by the power he believed he held. Assault. He laughed, a harsh sound that made several children start crying. Lady, that was barely a love tap. You want to see what real police work looks like. Vance. Vargas's voice cracked like a whip. We're leaving right now. Around them, phones were recording from every angle. Parents were shepherding their children away from the confrontation, but not before capturing video that would change everything. Mrs. Delgado, who had stopped coming to this park earlier, happened to be walking by and caught the entire exchange from the sidewalk. But it was Maya's response that transformed this from a simple case of police brutality into something much more significant. As she held her traumatized daughter, as she faced down a uniformed officer who had just assaulted her in broad daylight, her voice remained steady and professional. Officer Vargas, she said, addressing the partner directly. I need you to know that this entire incident has been witnessed, recorded, and will be reported through appropriate channels. Something about the phrase, appropriate channels, made Vargas's blood run cold. It was not the language of an angry civilian. It was the language of someone who knew exactly which forms to file, which departments to contact, which laws had been violated. Harlan, oblivious to the warning signs, sneered one final time. Report it to whoever you want, princess. Nobody cares what people like you have to say. As the officers finally retreated to their patrol car, as the crowd of witnesses began to disperse, as Lila's sobs gradually quieted against her mother's shoulder, one question hung in the air. Who exactly was Maya Bennett? And why did she seem so unnaturally prepared for what had just happened? The answer would reshape everything. But first, the system had to run its predictable course. Within the hour, the videos were everywhere. Mrs. Ellis's footage, shaky but clear, showed the entire confrontation from start to finish. The jogger's phone captured the slap from a different angle. The sound even more shocking when isolated from background noise. Most damning of all was the security camera mounted on the park's maintenance building. Its wide-angle lens documented everything with bureaucratic precision. But the official story being typed into the Chicago Police Department's incident management system told a very different tale. The subject appeared agitated and confrontational upon initial contact. Officer Harlan dictated to his partner as they sat in their patrol car a few blocks from Riverside Park. Female, approximately 30 to 35, exhibited signs of possible substance abuse or mental disturbance. Vargas's fingers hovered over the keyboard, her stomach churning. Oh, Vance, that's not what... Are you questioning my report, Officer Vargas? The weight of seniority, of departmental politics, of career survival pressed down on her shoulders. She continued typing. The subject became increasingly hostile when asked to comply with reasonable requests to relocate. When the officer attempted to de-escalate the situation, the subject made threatening gestures toward uniformed personnel. The lies flowed easily now, each sentence moving them further from the truth and deeper into a system designed to protect itself. No mention of physical contact, Harlan added. The subject was never touched by officers. Any claims to the contrary represent false accusations intended to discredit law enforcement. Meanwhile, back at the park, Maya sat on the same bench where everything had changed, holding Lila close as her daughter's tears finally began to subside. Other parents approached hesitantly, offering support, sharing their own stories of encounters with Harlan. "He made my son empty his pockets," whispered Mr. Brooks, a black father whose 10-year-old son had been playing basketball. "Said he looked suspicious shooting hoops alone. My family stopped coming here after he told us this park wasn't for our kind," added Mrs. Delgado, her voice shaking with remembered humiliation. Each story added another layer to the pattern Maya had been documenting. But now she was no longer just an observer. She had become part of the evidence. Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister. "Girl, you're all over Facebook. Are you okay? Do you need me to come get Lila?" Another message from Simone. "Saw the video. Holy Maya. What's your plan?" And then one that made her blood run cold from an unknown number. "Maybe next time you'll know your place." She deleted that one immediately, but not before screenshotting it for her files. "Mama," Lila said quietly, "why did that policeman hit you?" The question every parent dreaded: how to explain institutional racism and abuse of power to a child who still believed the world made sense. "Sometimes, baby, people with power use it the wrong way. But there are other people whose job it is to fix that when it happens." "Are you going to tell him?" Maya stroked her daughter's hair, choosing her words carefully. "I'm going to make sure what happened today doesn't happen to other families." What Lila didn't know was that her mother had already sent 3 text messages that would set federal wheels in motion. The first to her direct supervisor: "Cover blown. The incident escalated to assault. Request immediate consultation." The second to the FBI's Civil Rights Division: "Federal agent assaulted by subject under investigation. Video evidence secured, moving to Phase 2. The third to a secure number that connected directly to the Department of Justice. Pattern confirmed. Ready to proceed with formal charges. By evening, local news stations were running the story. Channel 7's report led with Mrs. Ellis's video, the slap playing in slow motion, while the anchor's voice provided context. A disturbing incident at Riverside Park has raised new questions about police conduct in Chicago's Southside communities. The segment interviewed several witnesses, their faces blurred for protection. "It was completely unprovoked," one voice stated. "She was just sitting there with her daughter. I've never seen anything so cruel." But the most telling moment came when they reached out to the Chicago Police Department for comment. The spokesperson's response was textbook deflection. "We are aware of allegations circulating on social media regarding an incident in Riverside Park. The department takes all complaints seriously and will conduct a thorough internal review of any claims of misconduct." What they didn't mention was that Officer Harlan's report made no reference to physical contact. According to official records, nothing inappropriate had happened at all. The disconnect between video evidence and police narrative created exactly the kind of federal case that Maya had spent her observation building. But now it was personal in a way that made her both more determined and more vulnerable. As she tucked Lila into bed that night, her daughter asked one more question. "Mama, are you scared of that policeman?" Maya considered her answer carefully. The truth was complicated. She wasn't afraid of Vance Harlan. She had resources and authority he couldn't imagine. But she was afraid of what this meant for every other black mother who sat on park benches, who took their children to playgrounds, who existed in public spaces while being seen as threats rather than human beings. No, baby. I'm not scared of him, but I am going to make sure he learns that his behavior has consequences. Outside, a car drove slowly past their apartment. Probably nothing, possibly surveillance. Soon, everything would change again. But for now, Maya Bennett allowed herself to be simply a mother, comforting her traumatized child. Tomorrow, she would remind the world that she was much more than that. The call came, interrupting Commander Vanessa Klein's first cup of coffee and what should have been a quiet morning review of weekend incidents. Commander Klein, this is Deputy Director Rachel Forrester from the FBI's Chicago Field Office. I need to discuss the Riverside Park incident from yesterday. Klein pulled up the report on her screen. Harlan's sanitized version still glowing in neat, bureaucratic paragraphs. I'm not sure what federal interest there might be in a minor neighborhood dispute. Deputy Director, ma'am, I need you to pull the personnel file for Officer Vance Harlan immediately, and I need the original incident report, not the amended version that's currently in your system. The words hit Klein like ice water. Amended version. She had approved Harlan's report herself, noting how cleanly it avoided any problematic details. Now, the FBI was suggesting there were multiple versions. I'm not sure I understand. Commander, the civilian who was assaulted in your officer's report. Her name is Special Agent Maya Bennett. She's been conducting federal civil rights surveillance in your district under deep cover. The phone slipped from Klein's hand, clattering against her desk. Around her, the precinct continued its normal morning rhythm. Officers filing reports, phones ringing, the coffee machine gurgling in the break room. But her world had just tilted completely off its axis. She retrieved the phone with shaking hands. I'm sorry. Could you repeat that? Special Agent Bennett was embedded in your community documenting patterns of discriminatory enforcement. What your officer did yesterday, assaulting a federal agent in the line of duty while violating the civil rights of local residents, that's now a federal crime with mandatory prosecution guidelines. Klein's mind raced through the implications. A federal agent assaulted by one of her officers while conducting official federal business. The video that had been circulating on social media wasn't just evidence of police brutality. It was documentation of multiple federal crimes. Deputy Director, if there's been some misunderstanding, there's no misunderstanding, Commander. Agent Bennett has been building a comprehensive case documenting systematic civil rights violations in your district. Officer Harlan's assault yesterday was recorded from multiple angles, including Agent Bennett's own surveillance equipment. The room seemed to spin. Klein pulled up the viral video on her computer, watching it with new eyes. The woman she'd dismissed as just another complainer, another civilian making trouble for her officers, was a federal agent. The calm, professional way she had handled the assault, the precise language she used afterward. It all made terrible sense. Now, how long has she been under deep cover, Commander? Under deep cover, documenting patterns of discriminatory policing practices in our district. And yesterday, your officer provided us with the kind of evidence that makes cases unwinnable for defendants. Meanwhile, blocks away in the FBI's Chicago field office, Special Agent Maya Bennett sat across from Deputy Director Forrester, her left cheek still bearing the faint bruise from Harlan's assault. Gone was the casual park mother persona. Her dark suit was crisp, her bearing unmistakably professional. Her voice, carrying the authority that Vance Harlan had never suspected, lay beneath her carefully constructed cover. Ma'am, I recommend we move to Phase 2 immediately, Maya reported, sliding a thick file across the conference table. The assault yesterday, combined with the evidence I've collected, gives us everything we need for federal civil rights charges. Forrester opened the file, revealing photographs, transcripts, video evidence, witness statements. A comprehensive case that transformed isolated incidents into a pattern of systematic abuse. And walk me through what you documented before yesterday's incident. Maya's presentation was meticulous, professional, and devastating. 17 separate incidents of discriminatory enforcement. 12 families forced to leave public spaces without cause. 8 children subjected to inappropriate questioning and searches. Multiple false reports filed to justify unconstitutional behavior. She clicked through photographs on her laptop. Officer Harlan targeted the Morales family for loitering while they watched their grandson play. The Vega children ordered off playground equipment deemed inappropriate for their type. Mr. Brooks's 10-year-old son was forced to empty his pockets while shooting basketball alone. Each image, each incident report, each witness statement built an undeniable case of systematic civil rights violations. But it was the final video that changed everything. Yesterday's assault, captured from Maya's own recording device with crystal clear audio and video. "Agent Bennett," Forrester said quietly, "you understand this changes your role in this investigation completely?" "Yes, ma'am. I'm no longer just the investigating officer. I'm also the victim of a federal crime." Back at the police station, Commander Klein was making the phone call that would end Vance Harlan's career. He answered on the third ring, his voice still swaggering with yesterday's confidence. "Harlan here." "Harlan. Officer, I need you to report to my office immediately. Bring your partner." "Is this about that incident yesterday? Because I filed a complete report and Vargas can verify." "Harlan, just get here now." 20 minutes later, Vance Harlan swaggered into Klein's office with the casual arrogance of someone who believed he was untouchable. Lena Vargas followed, her face pale with apprehension that proved more justified than she knew. "Sir, if this is about yesterday, I want to reiterate that the subject was completely non-compliant and potentially dangerous." "Shut up, Vance." Klein's voice cut through his prepared justifications. "The woman you assaulted yesterday is a federal agent." The color drained from Harlan's face. Vargas actually gasped, her hand flying to cover her mouth. "That's impossible. She was just some welfare mom." "Special Agent Maya Bennett, FBI Civil Rights Division. She's been conducting federal surveillance of discriminatory policing practices in our district. And yesterday, you provided her with evidence that will destroy both your career and potentially this entire department." The silence stretched like a held breath. Outside Klein's office, the normal sounds of the precinct continued. Phones ringing, reports being filed, officers discussing weekend arrests. But inside this room, everything had stopped. Vargas found her voice first. "Commander, when Vance filed his report, I tried to tell him, 'You filed a false report about assaulting a federal agent.'" Klein interrupted. "So both of you are suspended pending federal investigation. The FBI will be here within the hour to begin interviews." Harlan finally spoke, his voice smaller than anyone had ever heard it. "Federal investigation. Congratulations, Officer Harlan. You just became the poster boy for everything that's wrong with American policing. The woman you called a welfare queen has been documenting systematic civil rights violations for the Department of Justice. And thanks to yesterday's performance, she now has enough evidence to bring federal charges, not just against you, but potentially against everyone who enabled this pattern of behavior." As the two officers stumbled from the office, Harlan in shock, Vargas in tears, Klein contemplated the wreckage of what should have been a routine morning. Special Agent Maya Bennett hadn't just been underestimated. She had been systematically building the case that would transform how this community experienced law enforcement, and Vance Harlan had just handed her everything she needed to win. The FBI's Chicago field office transformed into a war room within hours of the revelation. Conference Room B, normally used for routine briefings, now housed the kind of federal investigation that made headlines and ended careers. The walls were covered with photographs, timelines, incident reports, and witness statements. Documentation that told a story of institutional failure. Special Agent Maya Bennett stood before a projection screen, her professional demeanor a stark contrast to the vulnerable mother Vance Harlan had so catastrophically underestimated just the day before. Her left cheek still bore the faint bruise from his assault, but her voice carried the unmistakable authority of federal law enforcement. The pattern is undeniable. She addressed the assembled team of FBI agents, Department of Justice attorneys, and federal prosecutors. 17 documented incidents of discriminatory enforcement, 43 civil rights violations, multiple false reports filed to justify unconstitutional behavior. She clicked to the next slide. A photograph of Harlan towering over the Morales family, his finger pointed accusingly at their 7-year-old grandson. This image shows the family ordered to leave the playground because their child was allegedly too disruptive for other families. The park was nearly empty at the time. Deputy Director Forrester, who had overseen dozens of federal civil rights investigations, shook her head in disgust. The brazenness is remarkable. It's like he believed he was completely untouchable. That's exactly what he believed, ma'am, Maya responded. And based on the department's response patterns, he had good reason for that confidence. Every complaint against Officer Harlan has been dismissed, buried, or redirected into administrative limbo. The next slide showed a timeline of complaints, dozens of them stretching back years, each one filed by Black or Latino residents, each one ultimately classified as unfounded or resolved through counseling. Federal prosecutor Lena Park asked, "Walk us through the assault itself, from your perspective as both investigating officer and victim." Maya's expression tightened slightly. Even for a trained federal agent, reliving the moment when professional duty collided with personal violation wasn't easy. Officer Harlan approached my position. His initial contact was textbook intimidation, false complaints about loitering, threats regarding child protective services, escalating verbal abuse designed to provoke a reaction that would justify arrest. She paused the video at the moment just before the slap. At this point, I had documented sufficient evidence for federal charges, but I maintained my cover because his behavior was escalating beyond anything I had previously witnessed. "Did you consider revealing your identity to de-escalate?" "No, ma'am. First, my cover was crucial to the ongoing investigation. Second, federal agents shouldn't need to identify themselves to receive constitutional protection from assault by local police. Third, the moment Harlan targeted my daughter with his rhetoric, this became personal in a way that transcended professional objectives." The video resumed, showing the slap in slow motion. Around the conference table, even seasoned investigators winced at the sound of palm meeting cheek, at the sight of a uniformed officer striking an unarmed civilian. "The assault occurred," Maya continued, her voice steady despite the personal nature of the evidence. "Multiple witnesses, multiple recording devices, multiple angles of documentation." Officer Harlan then proceeded to make statements that demonstrated both his awareness of the criminal nature of his actions and his confidence that there would be no consequences. "What statements specifically?" "That's what happens when welfare queens don't know their place. Remember that name when you're filling out your welfare applications. Report it to whoever you want, princess. Nobody cares what people like you have to say." Each quoted phrase landed like a physical blow in the quiet conference room. These weren't the words of an officer having a bad day. They were the statements of someone expressing deeply held beliefs about racial hierarchy and police impunity. "Agent Bennett," Deputy Director Forrester asked, "what was your daughter's reaction to witnessing the assault?" For the first time, Maya's professional composure cracked slightly. "Lila is 8 years old. She ran from the playground crying, asking me why the policeman hit her mommy. She's been having nightmares. She asks if police officers are good guys or bad guys now, and I don't have a simple answer for her." The human cost of Harlan's actions settled over the room like a weight. This wasn't just about civil rights violations or federal crimes. It was about a child's sense of safety being shattered by the very people supposed to protect her. Meanwhile, in interview room 3 down the hall, Vance Harlan sat across from FBI Special Agent Darius Ford and DOJ Attorney Elena Vargas. The swagger and confidence that defined the park encounter had evaporated, replaced by the hollow-eyed realization of someone whose world had collapsed overnight. "Officer Harlan," Agent Ford began, "you understand that you have the right to have an attorney present during this interview. I don't need a lawyer. I didn't do anything wrong." The denial would be pathetic if it weren't so dangerous. Even now, faced with video evidence and federal charges, Harlan clung to his distorted version of reality. "Let's review the incident at Riverside Park yesterday," Attorney Vargas said, sliding a photograph across the table. "Do you recognize this woman?" Harlan glanced at Maya's FBI identification photo, his face cycling through confusion, recognition, and something approaching panic. That can't be right. That can't be." Special Agent Maya Bennett, FBI Civil Rights Division, years of federal service, currently assigned to investigate discriminatory policing practices in Chicago's Southside communities. But she looked like what, Officer Harlan? The question hung in the air. Everyone in the room knew what he was thinking, what his assumptions were based on, what led him to believe that this black woman sitting peacefully in a public park deserved verbal abuse and physical assault. "I want to see the video again," Harlan said suddenly. They played it for him. All 4 angles: Mrs. Ellis's phone recording, the jogger's footage, the park security camera, and most damaging of all, Maya's own surveillance device. Each perspective showed the same sequence: unprovoked aggression escalating to criminal assault. "Officer Harlan," Agent Ford said, "as the video ends, you understand that assaulting a federal agent in the performance of their duties is a federal crime punishable by years in prison. But I didn't know she was what? A human being deserving of constitutional protection. The badge doesn't give you the right to assault civilians, officer. That's not what I meant." "What did you mean when you called her a welfare queen? What did you mean when you told her to know her place? What did you mean when you said nobody cares what people like her have to say?" Each question stripped away another layer of Harlan's attempted justifications, exposing the ugly core of assumptions that drove his actions. In the observation room next door, Commander Klein watched through one-way glass as her officer's career died in real time. She was joined by Police Superintendent Victor Lang, whose presence signaled the department-wide implications of this catastrophe. "How bad is this, Vanessa?" Lang asked. "Catastrophic. The FBI has documentation of multiple incidents, multiple victims, multiple violations, and now they have video evidence of one of our officers assaulting a federal agent. What's our exposure?" Klein turned from the window, her expression grim. "Sir, If the federal investigation finds systematic civil rights violations enabled by departmental policy or culture, we're looking at a consent decree, federal oversight of our entire operation, complete restructuring of training, hiring, and disciplinary procedures. And Harlan is finished. Federal prison, civil liability, criminal conviction. But the real question is whether this stops with him or spreads to everyone who enabled his behavior. Back in the interview room, the interrogation continued with methodical precision. Each question, each piece of evidence, each moment of video built an unassailable case against not just Harlan's actions, but the attitudes that informed them. "Officer Harlan," Attorney Vargas asked, "do you believe that Special Agent Bennett deserved to be assaulted because of her race?" "No, of course not." "Then explain your actions. Explain your words. Explain why a black woman sitting peacefully in a public park represented such a threat that physical violence was justified." The silence stretched for long minutes. Harlan's breathing was labored, his face flushed with the effort of trying to construct an explanation that didn't exist. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. I thought she was just another what? Another complaint that would go away." The admission hung in the air like a confession, not just to the assault, but to the systematic pattern of abuse that made it feel routine. The belief that black residents existed at the mercy of police discretion, that their constitutional rights were conditional, that complaints against officers like him disappeared into administrative black holes. "Officer Harlan," Agent Ford said, leaning forward across the table. "Yesterday, you assaulted a federal agent who was documenting your pattern of civil rights violations. Today, you're going to help us understand how many other victims there have been and who in your department made it possible." The investigation that began with Maya Bennett watching her daughter play in a park was about to expose the institutional rot that made Vance Harlan possible. And for the first time in his career, he was going to face real consequences for actions he never imagined would be challenged. Later, the federal courthouse in downtown Chicago buzzed with the kind of media attention that transformed local incidents into national conversations about justice and accountability. Outside, protesters held signs reading "Justice for Maya" and "End Police Impunity," while news vans lined the street with satellite dishes pointed skyward like prayers for truth. Inside courtroom 1847, Vance Harlan sat at the defendant's table wearing the ill-fitting suit of a man whose world had collapsed. Gone was the swagger, the uniform, the authority that once made families scatter from playgrounds. In its place sat a hollow shell facing federal charges that carried a mandatory minimum sentence. Federal Judge Eleanor Whitaker reviewed the plea agreement with the clinical precision that had defined her career. "Mr. Harlan, you understand that by pleading guilty to federal civil rights violations under 18 U.S.C. Section 242, you are admitting to willfully depriving Special Agent Bennett of her constitutional rights while acting under color of law." "Yes, Your Honor." His voice was barely audible. "And you understand that this plea agreement includes your cooperation with ongoing federal investigations into systemic civil rights violations within the Chicago Police Department?" "Yes, Your Honor." In the gallery, Maya Bennett sat in the front row, her FBI credentials clearly visible on her lapel. Beside her, Lila fidgeted in her best dress, still too young to fully understand the proceedings, but old enough to recognize that the man who hit her mother was being held accountable. Judge Whitaker continued reading the terms that would reshape Harlan's life: federal imprisonment, supervised release, mandatory civil rights training, prohibition from law enforcement employment, and payment of restitution to the victim and affected community members. But the individual sentence was only the beginning of the reckoning. Furthermore, Judge Whitaker stated, this court notes that the defendant's actions have triggered a comprehensive federal investigation, resulting in significant institutional reforms within the Chicago Police Department. The reforms were unprecedented in scope. A federal consent decree now governed CPD operations, mandating external oversight of hiring, training, and disciplinary procedures. Every officer must complete civil rights and de-escalation training. Body cameras were mandatory for all civilian interactions. Community oversight boards had been established with real authority to investigate complaints. Most significantly, the administrative limbo that buried previous complaints had been replaced with a federal reporting system that tracked patterns of abuse across individual officers and entire precincts. Assistant U.S. Attorney Lena Park addressed the court. Your Honor, this case represents more than one officer's criminal conduct. The evidence shows a systematic pattern of discriminatory enforcement that violated the constitutional rights of an entire community. Today's conviction sends a clear message that federal law enforcement will not tolerate such violations, regardless of the perpetrator's uniform or authority. Commander Vanessa Klein, sitting in the second row, knew her own career hung in the balance. The federal investigation had discovered dozens of complaints against Harlan that were dismissed, buried, or ignored. Her signature appeared on many of the administrative decisions that enabled his pattern of abuse. She would testify next week in the civil rights lawsuit filed on behalf of 17 families who suffered harassment, intimidation, and constitutional violations. The settlement negotiations were already approaching significant figures, money that could have funded community programs instead of paying for institutional failure. Officer Lena Vargas, Harlan's former partner, had agreed to cooperate fully with federal investigators. Her testimony about departmental culture, about the pressure to support fellow officers regardless of their conduct, about the informal code that prioritized loyalty over accountability, had become crucial evidence in the broader institutional case. The impact on the community cannot be overstated, continued Attorney Park. Families stopped using public parks. Children developed fear of police officers. Parents taught their kids to avoid spaces that should have been safe. The defendant didn't just violate Special Agent Bennett's rights. He terrorized an entire neighborhood. As the judge prepared to impose sentence, she addressed Harlan directly. Mr. Harlan, your actions revealed a fundamental misunderstanding of your role as a police officer. You are not an occupying force in these communities. You are not entitled to treat citizens differently based on their race or perceived economic status. You took an oath to protect and serve all residents equally, and you violated that oath in the most egregious manner possible. The gavel fell with finality that echoed through the courtroom and rippled across a community that had waited too long for justice. Outside the courthouse, Maya Bennett addressed the assembled media with the same calm authority she had displayed on that park bench. But now the world knew who she really was, what she represented, and why her composed reaction to the assault contained such power. Today's conviction represents accountability, she said, holding Lila's hand as cameras captured the moment. But accountability is just the first step. Real change requires sustained commitment to reform, to training, to treating every resident of this city with dignity and respect. A reporter called out, "Agent Bennett, what would you say to other communities experiencing similar problems with law enforcement?" Her answer carried the weight of federal authority and personal experience. Document everything. Know your rights and remember that the system works when people demand that it work. Sometimes justice requires patience, but it also requires witnesses who refuse to stay silent. The institutional changes triggered by one officer's catastrophic misjudgment would reshape policing in Chicago for years to come. Later still, Riverside Park looked exactly the same, but felt completely different. The playground equipment gleamed in the afternoon sun. Children's laughter echoed across the green spaces, and families of every background spread blankets on the grass without fear or hesitation. Maya Bennett sat on the same bench where everything had changed, watching Lila navigate the monkey bars with the fearless confidence that childhood should always possess. The bruise on her cheek had long since faded, but the changes it sparked continued to reshape this community and countless others across the nation. "Mama, look!" Lila called out, hanging upside down from the parallel bars. "I'm not scared anymore." The simple statement carried profound meaning. Not scared of playgrounds. Not scared of police officers. Not being scared that being black in public spaces made her a target for harassment or worse. Officer Lena Vargas approached the bench, her uniform replaced by the casual clothes of someone who chose a different career path. She had resigned from the force earlier, unable to reconcile her oath to protect and serve with the institutional culture she had witnessed. "Agent Bennett, I hope it's okay that I'm here. I just wanted to see. Please call me Maya. And yes, it's good to see positive change." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching children play without the specter of discriminatory enforcement hanging over their families. The new community policing initiatives had transformed these interactions. Officers now participated in community events. New residents by name understood that their job was to serve rather than control. Vargas spoke quietly. "The training programs you helped design, they're working. New recruits spend time in community immersion before they ever put on a badge. They learn names, stories, backgrounds. They understand that every person they encounter is someone's child, someone's parent, someone's neighbor." The federal consent decree governing Chicago police operations had become a model for other cities. Mandatory body cameras, civilian oversight boards, federal monitoring of complaint patterns. Reforms that once seemed impossible were now standard practice. "What about Vance?" Vargas asked. "He would be released soon. Mandated community service, continued supervision, prohibition from law enforcement. He's required to speak at police academies about the consequences of constitutional violations. It's not revenge, it's accountability. The kind of systematic response that prevents future officers from believing they can assault citizens without consequences." Maya's phone buzzed with a message from Deputy Director Forrester. "Phoenix PD requesting consultation on discriminatory policing patterns. Embedded investigation. Interested." She looked at Lila, now teaching a younger child how to navigate the climbing structure, then at Vargas, who was considering law school to become a civil rights attorney. "The work continues," Maya said, showing Vargas the message. "Are you going?" "Probably. Communities like this one exist everywhere. Families who deserve to feel safe in public spaces. Children who should grow up believing that justice actually works." As the afternoon sun began to set over Riverside Park, Maya reflected on how one moment of calculated cruelty exposed a system-wide failure and sparked changes that would protect thousands of families for generations to come. Sometimes justice moved slowly. Sometimes it required federal agents sitting on park benches documenting violations, building cases that transformed institutions. Sometimes it took a single black mother refusing to be invisible, refusing to accept that constitutional rights were conditional. Have you ever witnessed injustice and wondered if speaking up would matter? Maya's story proved that our voices, our videos, our witness testimony could be the evidence that changed everything. One of the deepest lessons in this story is that courage is not always loud. Sometimes it is the calm decision to stand still, speak clearly, and refuse to let injustice define your worth. Maya was humiliated, attacked, and degraded in front of her own child. Yet she did not break. She chose dignity over rage, truth over fear, and purpose over silence. That is what makes her strength so powerful. In real life, many people stay quiet not because they are weak, but because they are tired, afraid, or convinced that no one will listen. But this story reminds us that silence protects the wrong people, while courage can protect generations to come. Maya did not just defend herself. She became a voice for every parent, every child, and every family that had been made to feel small in a place where they deserved to feel safe. Her pain became proof. Her calm became strength. Her refusal to look away became the spark for justice. That is a lesson all of us need to carry in our hearts. When life wounds you unfairly, do not let that pain turn into surrender. Let it become purpose. Let it become the reason someone else feels seen, safe, and stronger tomorrow. Real change often begins with one person who decides, "This ends with me." If this story moved you, tell me in the comments. Do you think you would have had the courage to speak up in Maya's place? And if you believe stories like this can inspire people to be braver, kinder, and stronger, subscribe to the channel and join us for more meaningful life lessons that touch the heart and awaken the soul.